Well, welcome. We are excited to be here. We heard a lot of forks and knives clicking. It's always a challenge to have a conversation when you're fighting with food. So we appreciate your attention and engagement. So we are here to talk about deep pockets, thematic focus, and investor appetite for ed tech. We want to talk on stage about things that are whispered about in the background a little bit. So is ed tech investing, as we understood it, dead? I'll just say that it was a couple of years ago that I sat on this stage with Bill Gates, and he announced that the first stage of AI investment was going to be philanthropic, even if investors didn't realize that. So my question to this esteemed panel here is, with all of the froth in the AI industry, has your appetite for investment changed, and has your approach to investment changed? Richard, I might start with you. You had talked about the investing like an art historian.
Yes, well, I think I'm happy to answer the question, but I do want to say it's a beautiful day outside. So I think it'll be better to do class outside. If you could all just do single file. No, I think the question is pretty germane in that AI is changing markets, not just in education, but in pretty much every industry. And it's commoditizing things that we didn't think could be commoditized, like knowledge and thinking, and changing the landscape of certainly what we need to teach, what we need to test, what we need to train as a society. That means you are going to have a different view on what you invest, how you invest, what the services are around that, and how you transform your own companies that are in existing markets that are, again, already being affected by this technology. So there is no hiding your head in the sand. This is real, and it is already here, and it is changing almost every month. So at KKR, we do have a philosophy of what I would call ratable investment, where we don't invest more at a certain time and less at another time in terms of the overall scope of what we do. We try to be pretty steady, and through markets that have high multiples and low multiples, et cetera. But we are thematic investors, and there are certain themes that are, in our judgment anyway, are worth investing in and some that are not. Right now, there are aspects of ed tech that are absolutely worth investing in, and you saw it with the investment we made in Instructure recently. And there are some that are not, and I'll leave it to my other panelists to identify those. But I think the answer to the original question, is ed tech dead? Well, if it were, there would be no one in the audience, and it looks like a pretty full house. So,
Adam, what are your thoughts about maybe some of the traditional industries?
I guess I have to be the eternal optimist because it's my job to find and facilitate investment in education technology. But I have, I guess, two different ways that I look at it. Number one, I'm always the bull on investing in education and education technology because it's great business everywhere in the world. So if you just start with the foundation of demographics, economic growth, and policy, you've got a great market for education. And in part, it's because education drives economic growth, so it's circular. You add technology to it, and that expands your addressable market. So the opportunity is bigger because you can transcend geography, you can shift time, and you can use technology to make education better. And you do that through ways that make it adaptive and predictive and personalized, and you drive better results. And ultimately, the models look different because there's always a new technology, but the thesis is just as powerful. And I feel like, to me, I'm super excited about AI. I'm not afraid of it. It doesn't make me uncomfortable. It's just another technology moment in time that we have seen impact technology broadly and impact education technology for 30 years. So every time something happens, PCs, the internet, software as a service, cloud, social media, data analytics, all of these things, now it's AI, it will make education more powerful and better. I don't think it replaces teachers. Maybe we can reduce class sizes, but there will always be a human in the loop. Just the value add will be different. And ultimately, if we use technology to make education more effective and to reach more people, then that will drive better economic outcomes for the entire world.
We're very excited about AI, and we cannot afford not to invest in AI. So we are actively investing in AI. We're experimenting with AI because at the end of the day, we have been in this industry, I've been in this industry for a while now. We've been talking about personalized learning. And finally, I mean, we're in the world of machine learning, we've done all of it. But finally, we can be at that nirvana world of actually delivering on true personalized journey for students. So we're excited about the possibility. And we cannot afford to stay on the sideline. And also, the other aspect, when we look at it, is AI is going to advance. It's not AI for the sake of AI. It's AI enabling and advancing learning and teaching. Does it do something better than the way we've done it in the past? And I think that's how we come at it. So everything is increasing effectiveness of learning, focus on outcome, speed, right? Does it help teachers be more effective because it now allows them to spend more time teaching and allowing them to create lesson plans and so forth quicker, faster? So the productivity tool for teacher, the business case is very clear. In terms of the support for student to personalize that learning journey is clear. But clearly, as Adam said, we believe teacher, human in the loop, because that magic that happens in the classroom when the relationship between a teacher and her student cannot be replaced by a machine. So we feel we're very excited about it. And one other thing to talk about is when we talk about AI, it's not just about the impact on product. We also think about it, we have employees. So they need to be building skills for the future across the board, from production to delivery, right? And everything in between. So we think of it as this universal overall capability that's changing the world, and our employees need to have the capability, the knowledge, the experience to work in AI in everything they do.
When you mentioned this conversation with Bill Gates, I assume what he meant was most of the early AI experiments are going to fail, right? And that's what he meant by philanthropic, sort of tongue-in-cheek. It will be an investment in humanity figuring out AI. And I think that is true, but there is a bifurcation between the infrastructure layer of AI, which is very, very, very expensive to build and costs tens of billions of dollars, if not more, with no promise of return. And then there is the AI experimentation at the pointy application level, which turns out to be very, very cheap. And so will most of that fail? Almost all of it. But the good news is that it's cheap enough that even if it works just a little, and you can iterate quickly, and you can iterate often, and you can get feedback frequently, then it does have the potential to be both a contribution to the overall AI ecosystem, but also have an opportunity to make the kind of impact that you want to make in our environment. And for us, that includes good return on capital.
So if rapid experimentation is the pathway to lasting, measurable, maybe scalable impact in education, what do investors need to do to inspire rapid experimentation among the companies you invest in?
Make it okay to fail. Make it okay to, or make it required to close feedback loops quickly. Set the expectation that decisions will be made quickly. In the typical mode of product level experimentation, it may take months in order for a product team to get the conviction to declare something ineffective and to stop it. With AI, the technology tools are there to make that decision more quickly, but the cultural constitution of an organization hasn't changed. So really, what is hardest, I think, about rapid experiment in AI isn't the technology, it's the people. And getting alignment and say, hey, we humans have to move at the speed of AI. And then there are all the good reasons why human beings shouldn't be moving at the speed of AI, right? All the safety protections, that is an entirely different conversation. So I view almost the technology moves so fast and is so effective and can facilitate so much experimentation at such a low cost that actually the real question for organizations to answer is, how fast do we want to move? With what protections? How can we get in front of our customers and do right by our constituents?
Yeah, I think that's really, that last one is the key thing, because if you have the rapidity of development, experimentation, and market launch that AI allows for, you also have a rapidity of disruption of everything that you do, including those new things that you just did. So the cycles of disruption get more and more narrow, more and more speedy. So then where things really get interesting is, what kind of moats do you have to build? What kind of moats do you already have to have, whether those are in distribution or brand or approach or people or whatever, that will allow you to survive an incredibly rapid and accelerating disruption cycle that's enabled by these new technologies. That's an interesting question for, I think, all of us to think about in terms of the enterprises that we're either building or working on, because we're going to all have to confront it.
Are we seeing, Adam, an appetite among investors to make failure okay? I mean, if the hit rate has to go up, if we have to have rapid experimentation in order to find the thing that does work, and it's a lot cheaper to do rapid experimentation, are you seeing investors with the intestinal fortitude to say, maybe I have to invest in 15 experiments in order to get one that is commercially viable?
I think you have that intestinal fortitude on the stage. We need to be able to tolerate these rapid experimentations and failures if that is what happens. I'll leave it to Adam to comment on whether the overall market is rewarding that, but leadership requires it today.
So I think a lot of it has to do, so your ability to maintain the velocity of investment to accept failure, that's kind of a concept of how you need to think about it in the R&D context. I think there's also, you have to consider, how do you think about it in the field? How do you think about it in the boardroom? And how do we measure success? Because in part, it really is informed by the nature of the market that you serve, because the adoption cycle and the rate of embracing technological change is different in K-12, in higher education, and in enterprise. And if you try to take an enterprise mindset and apply it to K-12, it's too hasty, because K-12 is a very deliberative and iterative adopter of technology. It's a sophisticated buyer. It's also a complicated buyer. But people who are deeply ingrained in the K-12 ecosystem, for this example, will understand that. And so when we think about how do we continue to drive innovation so that we have a basis of sustainable differentiation over time, they have to think about, you have to take a long-term view so that you don't cut off the innovation effort before it has time to bloom. And so it's one of the reasons why at this conference, if you have presence of professional investors like Richard or Jason, these are specialists that understand the nuance and the difference in the context of each market, and where I personally have typically seen less success is when the investor perhaps is less informed on the nature of the end market and therefore doesn't have the patience to allow the benefits of the investment to yield.
What about the leadership profile? So when you think about this new world, you think about the rapid innovation and experimentation, you think about the kind of elusive impact we've had collectively on learning. What kind of leader and leadership team do we need that's different now in this age of AI versus, say, 5 years ago? And what happens if you like the solution, but you don't see that team?
You all looking at me? Okay. Do you want to start, Bethlam?
Since you run a company?
So I think from a leadership perspective, there's no more critical time than today. It's extremely important. Leadership is becoming extremely, extremely important because it's not just, there is so much change taking place across the board and internally, externally. So from a leadership perspective, what you are going to need versus what you may have needed a few years ago is you're going to need somebody who truly understands disruption, has lived through disruption, as well as a visionary. But I come back to you need to understand the market dynamics. You need to understand implementation. At the end of the day, we can have all sorts of leadership. If the leader is only, the strength is in one particular area, the voids are going to come back to plague us. So one of the things we've noticed when it comes, particularly right now with a number of AI-related initiatives, is the critical element we're seeing within that is cross-functional collaboration. Because it's not like there is an AI department that creates stuff. There isn't. It is infused across everything you do. So when you're thinking, if you're doing a product, you're not going to need just the pedagogist, the technologist, the production, but you're going to need the designers, the UI UX individual. You're going to need everybody from the beginning to the end in the process. So you need leadership that fosters collaboration as well as provides the room. Failure is okay, like what we talked about earlier. So I think what we're seeing is an era where it's important to understand this type of leadership is what's needed in the market.
But would you agree, though, that there's tension? So a lot of the solutions that we're talking about might not end up being billion-dollar market cap companies. Maybe they're going to be purchased by incumbents. Maybe the incumbents are going to purchase them because they want to purchase the culture of innovation as much as the solution. So what do the large incumbents need to do to preserve the vitality and innovation of tuck-ins so that they can grow and learn and evolve? There's a lot of entrepreneurs out here that will probably end up being in a transaction and being part of a larger organization. What do the big guys have to do to keep that sector vital? Jason, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think if you're a larger company acquiring a smaller company, you got to know why you're doing it. Sounds obvious, and what you're hoping to get from it. There's a fairly famous series of business school studies that were published talking about how most strategic M&A, i.e. big company buying a small company type M&A, fails. And so just as a starting point, the odds are against you. But there are various sort of approaches you can analyze the situation with to increase the odds of success. So one really good sort of understanding is having a real level of humility about what it is that your company, the acquiring company, is in the minds of its customers, and whether that is actually overlaps and jives with the business that you're buying. I think buying a larger company, buying a smaller company for its culture is probably, if it's just that, is probably not a great premise. I think a larger company buying a smaller company, though, for its way of iterating and developing products quickly and having a new route to market, and having that route to market have a lower cost of customer acquisition, for example, and generating new customers being led by product versus by marketing, that's cultural. There's an element of that, but it's a dramatically different thesis, and that is a plausible foundation for an acquisition. So I think a lot of this, a lot of the new technologies make this level of product development iteration possible. That introduces a whole new level of possibilities for M&A, but as a buyer, kind of buyer beware. You can't kill the thing you just bought.
Yeah, I'd like to address that as well, because I think the two questions you just asked are connected in an interesting way. What leadership requires these days of rapid dislocation and change is something a little different from what it did in the past, in that if you go far enough in the past, life was rewarding generalists, who could kind of do everything, the typical MBA general manager who would figure everything out. Then life started rewarding specialists who really knew something deeply and could go deep and build something and, fill around maybe the lacks that they had to, create a great enterprise. I think now we're coming into a place where, as you said, we need cross-pollination and cross-functional understanding, but we also need self-knowledge and empathy in our leadership, and that is a kind of core skill that some of the studies we've done at KK are our best leaders have that, and they've produced the best results. And this is kind of a new generation of leadership that can recognize when they don't know something, recognize when a new company they may buy has something that they can't touch because it is really the special sauce of what they're buying, and then not touch it.
Is that part of your rubric? Like when you evaluate an investment, you look at the product market fit, you look at the solution, the promise, you look at the business economics. Do you actually look for those qualities in leaders?
Yeah, we do, and I think you do.
We look at our own teams and we say, do we have the team that can nurture this sort of investment? Like, can we make the best of this business that we're going to spend a whole bunch of money buying? And sometimes we have, all of our teams have strengths. In this day and age, I mean, you just said it, you used the word empathy. Empathy is the right word. With the pace of technological progress, the shortage actually just in society, and so not surprisingly in our companies, is like empathy, right? And like having empathy for your world around you in a world that moves so fast is really, really critical. And it's really hard to blend technology progress without customer empathy, especially in this market, which is a deeply human market, right? Like this is one of the, I believe that this is going to be the very last market where technology replaces humans, if it ever does. This is the last one. And so that makes this human element even more important.
Just to add to that, Richard talked about the importance of being honest. We call that intellectual honesty. And what we have actually learned, we've done a number of tuck-in small acquisitions. And what we have learned is we each learn from each other. There are these unbelievable expertise these small company bring in that particular area. And then we, as a large educational company, have a whole other things we bring to market. And what we're seeing is when the two of us combine forces and work together, we see this unbelievable creativity that comes out of it. Because, and that's why we retain these acquisitions we make. And because what we're noticing is it brings in a specific solution that combined with other things, it's 1 + 1 = 3, as a lot of the investors usually say. And it's great to be able to see that real time. And when we do the acquisition, we look at it in that way. Oh, that, we can never get there at the speed they got there. There is something unique here. And we're honest about the fact that what this team has done is better, and we want to be able to be part of them. And together, we can bring a better solution that's going to make a difference in learning and more impactful at the end of the day.
That level of humility, right, that you use to describe that is common among great leaders today. I don't think you would find that among too many large company CEOs in, say, 2005 or 2010, right? So, like, just how big companies think about dealing with little companies in an era where change happens so rapidly is evolved.
Mm-hmm. So we can't.
I just want to add, because I think these are really great perspectives for, from the point of view of how do you manage a company as a leader and cultivate innovation? How do you sort of think about informing the culture of the companies that you invest in? The question that you were asking is like, how do we ensure that small companies continue to innovate? Number one, and number two, is there a role or responsibility of the larger companies? On the latter, I don't think there's any responsibility for larger companies. Like they would prefer to innovate themselves and just compete against the small companies. But you approach this point of there's a buy versus build if they do it better and they're already doing it. And so that's just a function of cost of capital and whether the price is worth acquiring it. And the risk is that you don't want to acquire it and break it. And that's the cultural element. And so assessing culture and cultural fit is a really important part of M&A, even though it has nothing to do with the business case. But I think for the smaller companies, you have to remember that it all resides in the context of innovation is about access to capital and deployment of capital. And we work through different periods of where capital is abundant and it's free, and points where it's not available at all. And so if you're a small company and you're innovating, internally you want to have that imagination and creativity and sort of like, let's go for it. But I think there also needs to be a mindset that is commercially self-aware, because these periods ebb and flow, they don't last forever. And the main point of it is to innovate and be successful before you run out of money. So you have to kind of think about it that way, and that is why we see good companies that either start to hit a wall because they're managing down their innovation to preserve capital because the capital is not available, and perhaps that becomes a good acquisition target at a reasonable price for another company that has more capital, can reinvigorate the innovation. But the fact that we have, and technology drives us, and a lot of the different technologies I mentioned earlier, they create exuberance in the market. It's just this, limitless opportunity, and we throw capital at it. And it's one of the things that makes the U.S., so innovative, is that it's the most efficient market for accessing capital and support for deployment of capital. So I don't think, you can take an immediate moment in time, which is there's still a bit of a hangover from like the peak valuations that we hit in 2021 that's caused people to be conservative. This sector in particular has like an endless desire for innovation. And part of it is because people just, you want to make it better, you want to contribute more, and people want to be commercially successful. It's okay to sort of, be financially successful while you make a dramatic impact to communities and the entire ecosystem that we sit in. But it's a really difficult balance. It's an equilibrium that you have to find, and sometimes you over-index on the spend, and the company doesn't disappear, it just gets bought. And sometimes if you undermanage the innovation, then you're just sort of like running in place. But I think that's the culture combined with the financial discipline that you have to have in the context of a non-philanthropic investment.
So Adam, just where are we now in that cycle, right now?
So I feel like it's interesting because we are seeing different behavior from different types of investors. I think you have a conservative point of view from VCs at the moment, and this relates to education technology, where at certain points, if you looked in kind of 2018 to 2021, the VC activity and deployment of capital was very, very strong. What you are seeing, on the other hand, though, is a much larger degree of participation from long-term oriented capital. And this may align to the concept that you need to be more patient to cultivate innovation, because the velocity of innovation doesn't always match the velocity of adoption. So if, depending on the market that you're in, long-term oriented capital can be better, and that can be anything from a core fund like KKR would manage. It can be, Jason, your firm overall has a very flexible path it's not sort of rigid to deployment and exit. But the participation that we see from family offices, that we see from pensions, sovereigns, other types of long-term or permanent capital. And I personally think, while it's already present on the education services side, so if you look in K-12 types of school operations, higher education, there already is participation today by infrastructure funds, which are taking a 15 to 20-year horizon. It hasn't quite extended to the technology that supports the operations yet, but I think it'll be a natural evolution. So you may see a change in the type of investor, but it is in part informed by the moment in time, too. If we get into another period of a strong market run, you'll see more capital come at the sector.
I thought that was a yes or no question. But
Well, we can't paint ed tech with one brush. I think, Adam, you said that to me when we were chatting earlier. Are you guys excited about any specific subsector now that you're a little more excited about than you might have been 3 or 4 years ago? And where does workforce readiness fall in your pecking order? Anybody? I'll go. Bella?
We're very excited about upscaling and overall college and career readiness aspect of the business. There is a significant need. What we're seeing is from a sector perspective is there's K-12, and then within K-12, and I call it K-12 going into higher ed, the whole notion of, we know students today are graduating and they don't have the skill necessary, whether they go to college or join the workforce or both, how to help them develop those skills. So I think that area is very interesting area and growth opportunity.
So we're almost out of time. Anybody have a sector that they're less enthusiastic about?
Well, that pisses people off, so I'm not going to answer that question. But I will say, mark your calendars. This is the date where a couple of private equity guys came up and talked about empathy. So that's a thing.
Well, thank you very much for a wonderful conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.